to another episode of Now That's a Good Question. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is brought to you by the South Carolina Safe Home Grant Program, a proud initiative of the South Carolina Department of Insurance. Each episode, we dig into the kinds of questions real homeowners ask about insurance, disaster preparedness, and how to protect your home and your wallet when life throws a curveball. Our mission, to turn good questions into great answers. And today's question is especially important for folks living along the coast. Can wind pool alternatives really help coastal homeowners? I'm joined by Smitty Harrison and Russ Dubisky to unpack it all. What wind pool coverage actually is, why alternatives are gaining attention, and how coastal residents can make informed decisions to stay safe and covered. Now, today's episode dives into this shift and when the wind pool is still the best option. And we'll explore how these alternatives are helping coastal families build resilience, save money, and feel more secure, especially as climate risks continue to rise. So again, Smitty Harrison is the director of the South Carolina Wind and Hail Underwriting Association, and Russ Dubisky is the former executive vice president with Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of South Carolina, and he's also a South Carolina Safe Home Advisory Committee member. Y'all, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So, Smitty, we talked a lot there, but kind of give us your overview and what you do and what your group does with the wind pool and why it was originally created and how its role has changed over time.
Well, let's go back to the 1960s.
Okay.
We were seeing a series of hurricanes impacting the South Carolina coast. We can think of Hurricane Hazel as a good example. Insurance companies realized writing wind and hail insurance on the coast was a bad idea. So the state legislature passed a law that said, yes, insurance companies, you can exclude the wind, but you as the industry have to provide it. And you will form an association called the South Carolina Wind and Hail Underwriting Association, and the industry will stand behind it. So if you go to your agent and they say your company will write your fire, your theft, your liability, but they don't want to write the wind, we'll step up and do that. You asked, where are we today? Well, most of our changes, I think, are more modernization of the wind pool. We do a lot over the internet, but for the consumer, the basics remain the same. We provide that gap. We fill in that gap if their insurance company doesn't want to write the wind. But as a clarification to something that you said, we got a hold of the 2020 census data. It included every dwelling in South Carolina, along with the geocodes. We ran it through a program we use that determines whether it's in our territory or out. So we know exactly in 2020 how many homes are in our territory. We compared that 5 years later to our policy count. We found that we write 8% of the market in the coastal area. So 92% of the consumers find insurance with their regular insurance company. Now, since then, they've built quite a few homes. We've been declining in business. So consumers are shopping their insurance, finding better coverage, better benefits. So the system works.
What led the insurance agency to maybe have a change of heart, it seems like, when it comes to wind and hail then?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
In terms of if y'all aren't as necessary now that more of these insurance companies are underwriting these folks and providing them that coverage.
Well, I think it's always good to have a safety net. The market exists on a lot of things. What kind of storm events? What kind of rates can the companies get? International reinsurance. Is South Carolina going to be aggressive in increasing building codes to the latest standards? All those things play into the decision-making process. But the good news is we're here. We consider ourselves to be a firehouse. Just because the number of home fires go down, you don't get rid of the fire department and the fire trucks. We need people, water, and hoses, and we're standing by for what could happen on Monday or 10 years from now.
And for us talking about that and looking at other states, we always look at Florida perhaps and the storms that have just really hit that state so hard. We've been pretty fortunate, but we still seem to get a lot of storms as well. But it doesn't seem like our insurance market is as bad off as Florida. What do you credit that to, and how can we improve upon that in a sense?
Yeah, I would say all coastal states are facing similar risks, which is the catastrophic hurricane that has a potential every year. Here in South Carolina, we've had some gentle reminders in our recent past to tell us that exposure is real. Florida has a lot more insured property values as you look around the state. And I believe, Smitty, it's probably like 80 to 85% of it is exposed to hurricanes. South Carolina is a little bit different, which benefits us because we sort of have a coastline, but then we also have Greenville and Aiken, which again, not immune to that. We had that with Helene as a reminder, but it's less catastrophic in nature and those exposures. So insurance companies are here. They've been here. There's been, as Smitty said, a good thing, a decline in the business that we've seen with the market of last resort. And that's because South Carolina is a good place to do business, have a great agency force, and have growth potential in terms of the state to where the companies want to do business here.
Mm-hmm. And Smitty, is wind and hail, is that required on the coast? Or is it something that your insurer is going to demand of you? And maybe
required by lenders, typically.
Yeah, it's required by lenders. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you remember this when you bought your house and had a mortgage, all those documents you signed. You said you would carry insurance, including wind and hail insurance. So we do not require it. The state does not require it. But your financial obligations to the mortgage company do. But also add, having wind and hail insurance, no matter what the market, is good. We see hurricanes, but we also see severe convective storms. That means like water spouts jumping out of the ocean, hailstorms, just bad rains. I mean, damages occur. Unfortunately, that's part of life. The good news is people have insurance to help restore them to where they were before the loss.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to keeping your homeowner's insurance, and especially when the coast, I feel like there are more requirements for those folks when it comes to having a newer roof versus maybe someone inland. Is that something that you need to have in order to maintain your homeowner's insurance?
I think based on the carriers, underwriting appetite can change with some relative frequency, again, based on the carrier. So relying on an agent to sort of find coverage for you that fits what you're looking for at that given point in time is critically important. But you might see, a carrier say, we're not going to write your home with wind coverage on a replacement cost valuation if your home or your roof is, say, 25 years or older. So that's something that would, from the consumer's eyes, limit my available options. So I'd have to shop around for that. But those are all subject to change. It sort of depends on what the loss experience has been and what the appetite might be for growth in the industry.
I'd say the roof is your first line of defense against wind and hail. A lot of misconceptions about a roof. I have a 30-year roof. What does that mean? We have a great research facility, the insurance industry does, in Chester County, South Carolina, and they actually have a roof farm. They put out sheds with various shingles on it, all kinds of instrumentation, and they actually watch the shingles age. Some in Chester and Richburg, South Carolina, don't last a year. And it's not a harsh environment. Take those products, put them on the coast with the salt, the wind, the pouring rain, the heat, and they don't last. So it's more than just an insurance company requirement. It's something that's protecting your valuables and the place that you've invested in, whether it's your permanent residence or the family vacation home that your family's owned for generations.
And I'm guessing if you select something that's a little bit more durable when it comes to your roof, you're going to see lower rates. How does that, what's the advantage there? What do you typically recommend to folks?
Well, I would say that having a good roof helps make you insurable. Now, going back to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, they have a program called Fortified Roofs, where it makes the home a lot stronger from a roofing perspective, and many insurance companies do give discounts.
Mm-hmm. So, Smitty, when we're talking about homeowners considering, when we're talking about wind pool coverage, what should they consider when evaluating wind pool alternatives? When is that an alternative to what y'all offer?
Well, I would say you should shop your insurance and go elsewhere. That's an odd thing for a business to say, but we're a safety net. Mm-hmm. It's a bad analogy, but we're sort of the assigned risk auto plan for coastal property. Many other insurance companies provide better coverages, better pricing, free financing, payment plans, a lot of great benefits that we don't offer. But on the other hand, we're pretty much take all comers. If no one else will write you, we'll be glad to do it.
And you're saying that's going down. You're seeing a decrease in that?
Yes. Consumers are shopping their insurance. In fact, I would tell you we'd lose a lot more business if consumers would shop. They are under the impression that they can't get out of the wind pool. There are no markets that'll help. It takes work. I recently shopped my insurance in Columbia, had to take pictures of the house, find out when I last put a roof on, when did I last update the heating and air conditioning, but I saved a lot of money. Some consumers that I talk to and try to help them get out of the wind pool come back to me and say, I shopped my insurance, as you said, and I'm still in the wind pool. But all the other coverages are better and cheaper. The check I'm writing is actually smaller, but I'm still in the wind pool. So there are benefits to shopping your insurance and letting the agent evaluate what new exposures do you have, how are things changed.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, but there's another important point in here, and that is that it's not always just about price. A lot of folks are looking for that lower price when they're shopping, and rightfully so, but there's also different coverages that are available in the private market versus what Smitty's policy might offer, with the wind pool. Things that I would say are very important if you can get it, like coverage for wind-driven rain. Not every company offers that, even in the private market. The wind pool, I don't. Do you all offer
no, we
coverage
do not
for
offer wind-driven rain.
For wind-driven rain? That's a valuable coverage. That's sort of the with wind forcing water in through pinholes that might exist in the structure and covering the resultant damage for that. That's a very important thing, especially on the coast. And so if you find a policy that has that coverage in it, and the price is still something that you can afford, you might want to talk about that option with your agent instead of focusing on the bottom line. How much do I have to pay for this?
I think we were talking about it too, but it kind of goes into a lot of the topics we've talked about on this podcast series in terms of it's not just the coast, but I think we tend to just focus on the coast. And while that is important when it comes to wind pool and wind coverage and hail coverage, what's your recommendation for folks who maybe think they don't need it because they live inland or they're in the upstate? And we saw Helene, but that was a one-off. It can't quite happen again. What's your recommendations to folks who are maybe considering it or haven't even thought to consider it?
Well, I think, I don't remember the exact number, but I think last year we had 41 tornadoes in this state. We had severe convective storms. I use that term because that's the new phrase. Hurricanes are severe, wildfires are severe, all those kinds of things. But just normal wind events are happening more and they're more intense. So yes, you might be further away from the coast, but we can have severe weather, Greenville, Spartanburg, Greer. And remember, Hugo rushed into our coast and it seemed like almost instantly was in Charlotte. So it's not necessarily how far away you are in terms of miles, but how far are you away in terms of time that the storm is traveling.
And Russ, any recommendations for folks weighing their options out there on the markets?
Yeah, I would just add that it's not just the straight line winds or the tornadoes, but trees on houses. I think most of the claims that we saw coming from Helene were relative to trees. And again, that's a storm that sort of came through Georgia and got to us that way, impacting non-coastal areas first, and significantly so. A lot of trees on houses. So yeah, that's a real reminder that it's there. We've seen some carriers start to, in their underwriting process and the inspection process, start to take drone footage and look at where your trees are located, look at the condition of the trees, and start to make recommendations to homeowners on what they can do to help prevent loss too.
If I could supplement what Russ said, now this is a coastal hurricane story, but Matthew in 2016 skimmed the coast. It didn't make landfall. Matthew itself really didn't do any damage, but the winds knocked trees into homes. Not trees on roofs, trees through the roof. If those trees had been properly trimmed and cut back, there'd been limited losses. But the good news is those people had wind and hail insurance through us or through others, and they were taken care of.
Yeah, so even if they're not able to get wind and hail insurance through the company that insures their home, they can get it through y'all and then still maybe maintain that coverage as well. Is that how I'm understanding that? Gotcha.
Yes.
I'm going to add and just mention one other thing here. We talk about alternatives. There's sort of a new or innovative product called parametric insurance, and it's very different than traditional insurance, which is sort of, hazard insurance. Did this happen? And we will restore you, hopefully, to a pre-loss condition. Parametric insurance is more about, did this predetermined set of parameters happen, and if so, we are going to pay this much under the contract. Smitty, I've started to see some of this happen, particularly in coastal areas, because the hazard insurance has gotten so expensive. People are out there looking for alternatives. They might find parametric insurance. All I would say is not, blanket statement about that's good or that's bad. It's beware what you're buying, make sure you understand what you're purchasing under that agreement, and make sure that that would satisfy whatever mortgage requirements you would have or something like that.
One thought I would add is if consumers are having challenges, the South Carolina Department of Insurance has consumer service representatives glad to assist them, point them in the right direction. And I'll give a shout out to a lot of people, the South Carolina Department of Insurance, the independent insurance agents and brokers of South Carolina, and South Carolina Wind and Hail. We spend a lot of time recruiting companies to our state to explain to them we have a good regulatory environment, we're a good place to do business, it's a competitive market, you should be here. So we spend a lot of time trying to give consumers alternatives. And over the years, a large number of companies have been recruited, but it's an ongoing basis. Companies, we don't like to talk negative about insurance companies, but solvency is an issue. They have to be financially strong enough to pay the claim. So they can't write everything. They have to limit how much they write, particularly in a given area.
Yeah, a lot of factors at play within the insurance industry, and we're just talking about the disasters and the rough parts of it, but there's so much more to go into. But this podcast and our series, we're really hoping to help illuminate the whole process for the consumer out there and the homeowner out there. So that's important information there from Smitty Harrison, who's the director of the SC Wind and Hail Underwriting Association, and Russ Dubisky, a former executive vice president with the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of South Carolina and a South Carolina Safe Home Advisory Committee member. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And that's it for us today. You can find this podcast at doi.sc.gov or wherever you find your podcasts, as well as on youtube.com, where you can see our smiling faces. For now, that's a good question. I'm Gavin Jackson. Thanks for listening.